Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. I am your host, Bob Mata, and welcome to Defense Diaries, where I am joined once again by my beautiful and brilliant co-host, Allie. What's up, girl?
Hey, babe. Hey, all. It's Tuesday, May 13th. And who are we joined with, babe?
We are joined with or by a couple of phenomenal defense attorneys. These guys are trial attorneys. They're my favorite type of defense attorneys. They're guys that are coming off a huge victory that we're going to get into tonight, because tonight we're going to be discussing the people of the state of Indiana versus Alison Davis, which is a case that probably didn't get as much publicity as it should have, because once again, it was under the, you want to call it, the watchful eye of Judge Francis Gull, who once
you're
again,
being generous today. Watchful eye.
I'm trying to be as judicious as I can. But not surprisingly, she decided not to allow cameras in on this one too. And it's a fascinating, devastating, heartbreaking case. It's all those things. But ultimately, we are going to invite Andy Baldwin and his partner, both on the case and in his practice, Max Wiley, to the stage to hear all about this case. I'm really excited to have both these guys on.
Get an NG even with Gull steering the ship. Here we go.
It's going to be an unbelievable story, gentlemen.
Hi,
Pleasure
Bob.
to have
Hi,
you
Allie.
both. Max, did I say Wiley right? Is it Wiley, like Wiley E. Coyote?
Yep, you got it.
I love it. Well, welcome both of you. Max, this is my first time having the pleasure to meet you and invite you onto the show. So welcome, my friend. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. Andy, of course, is a dear friend, and we are thrilled to see you. And when I got on with you guys, I said, look, you guys must have had some pretty good sleep and a pretty nice weekend this weekend based on what happened last Friday.
I think we're both still jacked up, Bob, physically, but much better.
Yeah.
I'm still recovering. We were up till about 3 a.m. We were at the jail until 2, Friday night into Saturday morning. So we were there till Alison got out about 2 a.m. And then I didn't really sleep that night.
Well, I mean, a lot of lawyers would just go home and let her get out on her own. So that really says something about you guys. And
well, we're gonna get to that part of the story a little later, because it's typical Gull. What happened after a woman who was found not guilty by a jury of her peers? What happened afterwards? There's a reason why these two guys, instead of being able to go celebrate with their families and their loved ones, had to stay on the clock. But we'll get to that, I promise. So, all right, for those now today, we've been covering the Karen Reed thing, which is just an insane case that's taken on a world of its own. There was no trial today, so that gave me a perfect opportunity to be able to read through the probable cause affidavit. So those that were with me earlier today have a basis, a somewhat of an understanding what this case is about.
or at least
one of you guys
state claimed the case was about.
Right. Well, we all know that at this channel when we're looking at a probable cause affidavit, that's just the government's theory and it's nothing more. So can you guys give us kind of an overview of the facts of the case?
Yeah, Max was the architect of this win, and he should be the one to kind of explain the facts, I think.
All right, have at it, Max.
And Andy can jump in. Andy's the natural storyteller, so he can.
Yes,
feel
he
free
is.
to
The guy
interrupt.
can tell a story, that's for sure.
So it started with Allison finding her husband at the bottom of the stairs, bleeding profusely. She woke up to it. She's always said she woke up to it. She was sleeping on the couch. They had argued the night before, as she told the police from day one. So she finds him at the stairs. He is bleeding profusely. It is, there is a ton of blood. There's no doubt about that. She calls 911. 911 recording came into evidence. She's panicked. She, says basically the same thing that she's always said, that she tells the police, that she found him at the stairs. She woke to a loud noise, found him at the stairs. He's bleeding profusely, calls for help. They get out there very quickly. They find him. And then initially, the amount of blood threw the officers off. I mean, it was a lot of blood by all accounts. And they had their doubts that it was a fall down the stairs. And the positioning of the body, it is at the bottom of the stairs. But his legs hang out a little bit past the staircase and the banister. And so it doesn't, you could see why somebody would look at that and say, well, maybe, that doesn't necessarily look like where somebody would land from a fall down the stairs.
So when you say his legs were out, so you've got describe the stairs for us and where the legs were. I got distracted by my little one back there walking.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't want you to
Blows
think
right in, not a
all
care in the world.
smiling about like, oh, that much blood in it. No.
So if you are, if you're facing down the stairs, right, it's a straight shot. They are steep by all accounts. Even some police witnesses said it's a steep set of stairs, but it's a straight shot down. And so there's a banister on the left side at the bottom. I think there's a rail on the right side, but there's kind of a banister with posts. And so his legs are overhanging the left side of the staircase to the point where you'd wonder how those legs land up. If he comes down the stairs, they're kind of hanging out this way.
Like out the side of the.
So yeah, if we're facing down, they're a little bit hanging over the left more than you would expect. And that's, when I saw the pictures, I thought, that I get it. That's not necessarily where you would expect somebody to land when they fall down the stairs. And so that's really, where the suspicion came from in the first place. Allison talks to the police. She's cooperative. She gives them consent to search her home. And if anything from that initial interaction, the police claimed it was suspicious because she was too calm. And so that was kind of the second piece of their puzzle that they were putting together. And she has
I guess as
odd
men, they were expecting hysterical women to be the reality.
Yeah.
Some sexist police there. Yeah, the word used a lot was nonchalant, that Allison was nonchalant.
Yeah.
But I think we all know nowadays that people deal with grief differently. But go ahead. Exactly.
Yep. And grief and trauma. And you mix those together. And then you've got the fact that, if your husband does drink, if he's a heavy drinker, you've maybe found him doing, not the best things before because of the drinking, just, I'm saying like falling down or, what have you. But by all accounts, the deceased was a good man. I'm not going to say anything bad about his character. It's our client's husband, and she's, devastated by his loss. But you throw that in the mix that he was heavily intoxicated. He, was a hardworking guy, had a job, but would drink heavily on the weekends. And so there's other times where she found him passed out in the kitchen or something like that. So you throw that all in the mix, and that's kind of where her mind goes, that this isn't as serious as it seems. This is not that far off from a situation she's been in. And then, she's in shock. She's not registering, not processing. And then there's more to it. I could go on.
Well, let me ask you that. And I do want you to go on. So what time does the 911 call happen? Like what time So this is early morning hours, right?
And
Yep,
what does
early
she
morning
say
hours.
she does when she finds the body?
So the first question, 911 call was 4:36 a.m. She says she tries to pick him up and she can't, and then calls.
And that explained kind of the position of the body kind of being weird at that point.
Certainly could have, that's one variable, certainly. And then, but yeah, and then that, I mean, they later claimed there were issues with the crime scene that, virtually were all explained by her having tried to pick him up. He had bloody handprints on his shoulders. That's consistent with her having tried to pick him up. There was some blood spatter that they made a big deal of that was consistent of him being laid back down in the blood when she couldn't pick him up.
Or fall or slipping out of her hands even.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
And so let me ask logistically a little bit about the staircase. So how wide would it be, would you estimate it is? Like,
it's not a wide staircase. We probably have the measurement somewhere. Actually, I don't know that the police did take measurements of that.
really?
What are their both of their like statures?
She is 5'4". At the time, according to, she was much bigger than she was at trial. I can tell you that. They, in the probable cause affidavit, said 220 pounds. And she's kind of big in the body cam photos. He was 5'9", 230. I think the weight they gave for her was just straight out of the BMV. I don't know that was particularly accurate, but that's what they thought at the time.
Okay.
And how many, on best guess, if you don't know exactly, how many stairs were there from top to bottom?
We tried to go in and look and do our own measurements, and Max and I staked out the house for a while, and we saw a guy go in, and it was a new owner or renter or whatever, and he would not answer the door. So
wait, are you telling me that the cops didn't count the number of stairs from top to bottom?
There are photos of it.
But you wanted to see it with your own eyes.
Yeah. I think the measurements were not real good.
I mean, which goes to the fact that they had formed a conclusion as to what happened immediately. When just reading through the probable cause affidavit, I clearly got the sense that at the scene that the people that mattered in terms of decision making for law enforcement had come to the conclusion that they didn't think that this was an accident, and that they thought that Alison had a hand in this initially before she made any statements about, whether or not they were the only two in the house, or, whether or not they thought somebody else may have come in. So, I mean, you're seeing all the indications of just a piss poor investigation where biomechanically, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever fallen down the stairs, but I think we have a staircase that I've gone down like 100,000 times in my life. And I think it's 19 stairs, and it's pretty wide. And there've been a couple of times where I've kind of caught the front of my shoe, like at the very top landing, where if I didn't catch myself, like trying to figure out how someone would land when you don't know what the biomechanics of how they fell was, and you don't try to do anything to figure it out, is insane to me. So, all right. So you've got this fact pattern. What happens next with Alison?
Well, so let's see. So the morning of, so she talks to the detective. She gives a statement, video recorded, says the same thing. She said on the 911 call, says the same thing she's been consistent about. She woke to a loud noise, finds him there at the bottom of the stairs. Detective lets her go to the hospital, takes some pictures at the scene, and then that's it. Detective does not suspect foul play after the first morning, after he's spoken with Alison and looked at everything himself. So then the next thing that kind of leads to the charges ultimately is the ER doctor has concerns. I think that's in the probable cause affidavit.
Yep.
She doesn't think it's consistent with a fall down the stairs. And there's kind of a couple couple things in her opinion. Kevin's temperature was 91 degrees when he makes it to the ER. And so this is, I think the temperature gets taken within about an hour. And so that, by all accounts, that's a low temperature. And then the ER doctor, I think based largely on the CAT scans, reaches the opinion that he's been struck in multiple areas of his head. And so she thinks that's consistent with the fall. Our neuropathologist ultimately disagrees with her conclusions. But I think those are kind of the two main things in her opinion, that then she communicates that to the detective.
And the reason the temperature mattered, just so we're clear, was Allison saying that she had heard a thump at 4:30, right around 4:30 in the morning, and indicating that that's when he fell, and the medical people were saying that's impossible that he fell then because his body was so cold.
Too cold. Right.
So,
I mean, Bob be in trouble because my temperature runs low. I don't think I've ever taken my own temperature and it's been 98. It's 97, 96, something like that. I don't know if they took pictures of the thermostat, what time of year it was. It's freezing in this house.
Well, also the hypothalamus was basically destroyed from the fall, and that is the regulator of temperature in the body. It's the thermostat. And in drinking, being a drinker, that also impacts it. He was right under an air conditioning unit. And so there were a lot of reasons to believe that it absolutely could have gone as Allison said. There was a fall. She hears it. She gets up and tries to help him. And I think that's probably what happened. And we just can't account for that hypothalamus, what happens when it's destroyed. I mean, so anyway.
I mean, is there a possibility? It sounds like they were out. They went, they probably, what does she drink? Do you ever get out of her what she drinks at the bar that night?
I think it was beer. She was, they gave her a PBT at, so 5:15 in the morning or so. And she was double zeros. She had no.
Okay. So she was relatively sober, if not completely sober at that point. And I mean, is there a possibility? I mean, that's early morning, right? I mean, and depending if she's sleeping on the couch, he was upstairs, he's coming downstairs. I mean, there exists a possibility or a world in which she may have heard a noise, and theoretically it could have been an hour earlier, but in her mind, in a state of sleep, she hears it. Kind of, it doesn't really register, and then she wakes up an hour later. She's like, "Oh my god! Like, did I hear something?" And she gets up, and then discovers her. You know what I mean? I'm like,
well, we had an expert, Bob, that we weren't. That go ahead, Max. Tell them about that while we're on the topic.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a very valid theory. And we had a forensic neuropsychologist, Dr. Polly Westcott, very renowned, very esteemed, psychologist. And so, we wanted to get into that. I think there's a common sense aspect to that that's happened to all of us in our everyday lives. But there's also plenty of science to say when you're in lighter stages of sleep, you incorporate things into your dreams. You can hear something and it registers in a sense, but it doesn't wake you up. And then from there, you don't have any sense of time when you're sleeping. And so, I mean, the science fully supports what you laid out, Bob. And so we wanted to get into that. We wanted to have Dr. Westcott present that, and we were not allowed to. That was ruled inadmissible. I believe the state's argument was that it was not relevant.
Was that what the judges?
And obviously, I'm not sorry, babe. I'm not laughing because that's funny. I'm laughing because Judge Gull. So, like Max, was this your first experience with Judge Gull?
So why don't we start with when you guys get the case and you realize it's Judge Gull, what's the discussion you're having and what do you do next?
Well, the discussion we had with Allison, who at the time, I think she had a warrant for her arrest, and she had come down to Indianapolis to meet with us. at our Indianapolis office.
I think we were waiting for that charges. We knew charges had just been filed or something like that.
Yeah, I think either there was a warrant and she was going to go turn herself in if there was, or she was that we were expecting a warrant very soon. I don't know. Either way, she had come down to consult because she had been told that she was going to be, charged. And I was super shocked when I realized it was in front of Judge Gull. And this was at a point in time when we had been kicked off the case. It was in December of 2023. So we didn't know exactly whether we were going to get back on, and for those that don't know out there, the Indiana Supreme Court interceded and told Judge Gull that we had to get back on the case. And that's on this other case that we were on. And so when this really, really wonderful family, I mean, I can't express how awesome they are and how beautiful they are and how kind they are and how forgiving they are and all these great adjectives. I could go on and on and on. But when we first meet them in our Indy office, these parents have been married for 52 years. Okay. I mean, this is the parents of Alison.
Yeah.
And they are just heartbroken. And if you met, she goes by Allie, by the way, too. So, okay. But if you met Allie, you would think you just instantly know there's no way that she could do that. You just get that vibe from her, and everybody that knows her would say that too. And so these are just imagine being a parent in a lawyer's office. Your kids have never been in trouble. They're all professionals. And for now, you're talking with lawyers, and they're talking about, basically spending 65 years in prison is the possibility. And then on top of that, you then have to announce that, well, the judge that is on this case is somebody that recently called you grossly negligent to the world. Okay.
Right. Not a fan.
A little bit of
she's not a fan of Andy Baldwin.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a problem, but as we were, feel obligated to do, we let the family know everything about that. Yeah. Google it. Here's what's going on. They stuck with us after that. Max, is that your memory of how that all went down?
Yeah, I think I didn't meet him initially. I met him a couple of days after. I mean, one crazy thing about it was like 2 days before Christmas, or it was right around Christmas when things, the office kind of shuts down, that we were hired, I think. And then the initial hearing was like a day or two after Christmas. But yeah, it was, that Delphi was kind of looming over this case. And I know, and so we would kind of gauge their reactions, because I know they're reading the news about Delphi, and from our standpoint, it's just like, I'm very glad that they trusted us and they had faith in us. But there were times where I was just thinking, how can you read this bad press about Delphi and, not wonder, who the hell you're dealing with, and if we know what we're doing. But fortunately, they have faith in us from day one. And
yeah, well, I don't know that I would.
Their gut was right.
Yeah.
No, I definitely can see the family being concerned. Like, all right, well, this judge is going to give you a hard time. Maybe this is not the right move for us. Did you try to change a judge, or how to treat the whole judge situation?
Yeah, we did. In January 2024, we filed a motion to ask her to recuse herself. It was around the same time that we filed our first of the motions to recuse on Judge Gull in the Delphi case. And that was met with a quick, well, maybe not so quick, usually not so quick with her response. And, the family ultimately landed on this kind of thought process related to Judge Gull and the way that she, had treated us in the Delphi case. I'd rather have people that are going to fight than people that are not. Right. And
going to cower to her.
Yeah. And I think that ultimately we were throughout the trial very respectful, as is our nature, not met with the same amount of respect on the other end, though, unfortunately. In some ways it was worse.
Based on what you said, that it was around the time you filed the motion in the Allen case to recuse, you had already gotten back on, or the court had already said you've got to let the attorneys back on.
Yeah, it was within days of getting back on. That was January the 19th.
I wonder.
And then we filed the motion to recuse on Allison's case. I think the January the 24th or 5th, I think. So
I wonder if it was before you had gotten back on, if she would have granted it. I mean, at that point, she could not grant it, because if she granted it there, she'd have to grant it in Richard Allen's case. It's the same, the same situation.
Set of circumstances,
right?
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, like just some biographical info that I'd like. So, how long were Kevin and Alison married?
2019, so 4 years in total. I think they got together in 2013. So
no kids yet?
Together for 10 years, no kids.
Okay. And
married for 4.
And were they both gainfully employed?
Yes.
And what did Kevin do for a living?
Kevin worked at it's landscaping, or is variously described as a landscaping company. I think it was more like heavier duty kind of construction, more, but
it was a CDL. He had a CDL.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, worked with his back. He was a labor
hard worker.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he was a hands-on guy. And what did Alison do?
Alison worked at Victoria's Secret, and she'd been there for 7 or 8 years. She's been there for a long time.
Okay. And in terms of, so once the arrest goes down, she was smart enough to have already tried to consult with some lawyers, which is obviously smart. Once she catches wind that it sounds like they're going to be charging her. And then once they ultimately charge her and you guys get the case, and I mean, you can't really understate, like, in terms of that situation with Andy and Gull that was going on. Obviously I was following Richard Allen's case very, very heavily. At that point I had already befriended Andy, and I knew what was going on in terms of Andy's kind of emotional state at that point, when they had, like, she had pulled the shit that she had pulled in that case and said the things that she had said publicly about a guy who's crafted a career for 20 plus years and is highly respected in the entire state. Is
30.
Yeah, 30 plus years. Sorry. That had, like, this reputation as being a stand-up human being first and foremost, but a very accomplished and respected trial attorney. And she kind of just in one fell swoop was able to taint that. And I know how that was affecting Annie mentally, right? So you're going into this situation where you've got, and Alison and I have been in these situations where you've got your clients and their families sitting with you, and you're trying to calm their fear, to assuage their fears, or and you want to bring it up because you do worry about those things. You always worry about a judge that you have running hot with you, potentially with one client and one case, and that bleeding over, which shouldn't be the case. Should never be the case with the judge, but you still do worry about it as attorneys, because again, we're all human beings. I mean, that conversation must have been legit in terms of how deep it was, because, this is somebody's life that's at stake. I mean, 65 years is, if she's getting out at all, she's getting out as a very old woman. So, the better part of her entire life is what hangs in the balance. And was it a thing where, like, kind of the whole family was involved, or was it just Alison, or was it, like, how did that work out?
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, the whole family was involved. And at times they're a close-knit family. Certainly they, both the mom and one of Alison's sisters is a paralegal. So they kind of, know a little bit about the justice system. So the sister was involved a lot in our conversations.
That's
it makes
helpful.
sense. Like Andy said, at that point they were like, you know what? We'd rather someone who's going to fight, that we know is going to fight, and not going to just cower to the judge. So what was your, I guess, first experience in that case, as far as rulings with Judge Gull, that really gave you that, oh shit, it's going to be more of the same feeling?
Well, So the first big ruling was the Garmin data, the fitness watch data.
What was the basis for that?
Well, first of all, you may want to learn what was on the data.
Yeah, like
that's
Alex
important.
is jumping way too far ahead in kind of the timeline.
All right, yeah, Bob likes to steer.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I got to get water anyway.
So. And you're jumping to the heart of the matter. So,
all right, jump back.
Post arrest, what do you start getting in the discovery that makes you think? So you've got a client who is obviously maintaining her innocence, I'm going to assume, right?
Yes.
And when you start getting the discovery coming in, what are you seeing that has helped substantiating, corroborating that for you guys as attorneys? You're like, all right, we're with you here because the evidence supports what we think you're saying happened. And so what were your first moves when you start seeing the discovery?
Honestly, I think it was a lack of incriminating evidence. I mean, the probable cause affidavit's pretty thin, as you might have noticed if you read it today, and there's just nothing else really. And I can tell you, I think one red flag early on for me was that they'd relied on some junk science, and it was in the police report. It didn't make it to the probable cause affidavit, but they had a 911 analysis from this. It's a retired police officer that cooked up this theory about how he can tell if somebody's lying on their 911 call. His name is Tracy Harpster. He's a total fraud. He's been exposed. There's a ProPublica article about him. A journalist just did a deep dive into him, and it's been then scientifically reviewed after he came up with his theory, that he pulled out of his ass. And then
I can't imagine something more horrifying than that ever becoming a thing than like somebody reading the tea leaves of a 911 call, and he's a voice whisperer, and he can, I can sniff out if somebody's full of shit. I can hear it in their voice. Yeah. Wow. That's terrible. Yeah. That did not make it. See, I'm glad I asked. That did not make it into the probable cause affidavit, which is crepe paper thin. So like that was my first instinct when I was reading through it. I'm like, wow, like where's the actual evidence in this case? So, all right. So you get that in terms of the data, like you want to, like every case these days, it's the phone data, and there's other data in this case that is of great interest. So what are those things showing you?
So, her phone had no user activity from the time she said she was asleep. That ultimately the Garmin also said she was asleep. We weren't able to analyze the Garmin data until a while into the case, because it's just complicated. It's fairly novel. We ultimately had to get a Purdue professor and then a professor from Columbia University to assist us in the analysis. But that didn't come until, maybe June or July of last year. And so we knew there was a watch. The watch is very apparent in the body cam, and the state had gotten a search warrant for the data. The state got the data, which is an important fact. Significant. Yeah. And so we're working on that. We're trying to figure out, what this data means. But there's nothing on the phone, which to me, as somebody that's been in the criminal justice system for a while, is a big indicator, just because, especially somebody that's never committed a crime before, the idea that they could do that and not leave a trace of evidence on their phone in this day and age is, I find that hard to believe. And so there's nothing on her phone of an incriminating nature whatsoever. No. Yeah. So that, again, I think that's hard to sell to a jury. I think I made that argument, but that's something you just have to be around a lot of cases and see all the dumb stuff that people that commit crimes do on their phones. Yeah. So there's nothing there. Eventually they find out, the state does, their phone guy finds something from the Garmin that says she's asleep from 1 to 4:30, or more like 2 to 4:36. But that still is just coming from the phone. But eventually our Purdue professor, brilliant guy named Dr. Umit Karabayak, who's like he's the guy you'd want to call, I would say, about this stuff. This is what he does. He teaches law enforcement how to get this data and how to analyze it. They figure out the data and they figure out it shows she was asleep. The data from the watch that you just can't fabricate because it's second by second. It's in code. And it's binary files, which means if you change one digit of them, the file's corrupted. Not to mention it came from Garmin. It was the law enforcement got a search warrant, gets the data directly from Garmin. So this is, pristine data that shows she's asleep when she said.
And this is data that the state has used in other cases.
Oh.
No, there's no cases in Indiana, I should say. It has been used. Even data from a Garmin has been used. In fact, in the guy who murdered Lake and Riley, I can't remember. It's a Hispanic gentleman that was convicted, and the prosecution used Garmin data in that case.
And used that expert, right?
No.
That's a different one.
Our other experts, Dr. Keith Diaz from Columbia University. There's really not many cases about this data, about the wearable fitness data. And so it is a fairly new area of the law. But our other experts.
Data's data, as long as you have someone describing the methodology of how you're interpreting the data and how you're interpreting it right. It's not like a brand new thing. Like, wait, you can get data from an electronic device, from a watch, it can tell you. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like some guy saying that he can read, people's minds and voices from a 911 call or some shit. Like this seems like it's got some pretty solid science. And I mean, if anybody knows anything about Garmin, like Garmin to me was always kind of the first name in GPS technology.
Yes. It's got a very good reputation.
And this was a watch, a Garmin watch?
Yep, Garmin fitness watch. Yep. And the wearable fitness trackers have been tested extensively. I had no idea how much scientific testing there was, but there's a ton. So in part because they're also then used for other scientific studies by the National Institute of Health. So if they're just following a large population of doing a sleep study or something, they use the fitness watches. And so they need to know that they're valid. Otherwise they're, blowing millions of dollars.
So it's only Alison that had this watch, not Kevin?
Yes, it was Alison.
And so when
wasn't,
you guys, go ahead, Andy.
But it wasn't just that she was asleep. It was also that two other things that were incredibly important. And any one of these individually was enough to create reasonable doubt. The other aspect of the Garmin watch was her heart rate was monitored, and their quack expert Dr. Smock came up and said that she hit Kevin with something the equivalent of like what did he say, Max? Some type of.
He believed it was a kettleball or
a heavy kettleball, and that she's swinging it, and yet her heart rate never increased while she's asleep. And then their claim was that she got rid of the murder weapon, and the steps in the Garmin would indicate that there's no way that she got rid of it and left the house and came back. They would have been able to find it. So the Garmin
tells
watch,
you to take it off. I take it because it's not getting a heartbeat anymore.
Yep.
Yeah. Nobody doubts that. Nobody says. Everybody agrees she was wearing the watch the entire time. So those three things. It's like she's sleeping. Her heart rate never went up. In the way that you would expect. Within
no steps too.
And what about the time preceding? So her initial story to the first cop that she talks to says that they were out to the bar until about 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get back. They have an argument. Do we know what the argument was about roughly? Like what were they arguing about? Was it just typical family shit?
It was over. There was a waitress that had been using the F word at the bar, and Kevin did not like it. And so it wasn't really, I would even say it was not even an argument. Okay, here's what it was. And I'm going to guess that you guys have had this happen. Max and his beautiful wife, Jen, it's probably happened with them. It's where, and it's usually the guy that's doing it. just talking. Like, I can't believe this happened. And what is going on here? They're not even arguing.
Oh, he's just ranting about something that happened that wasn't her.
Yeah. He just wouldn't shut up about it. And she said, I got to get to bed. And then, okay, I'll stop. And then he continued on. She said, I'm going downstairs. I can't deal with this anymore. So I think she was even wrong in detailing it or describing it as an argument. It was more of I had to get away with him because he just wouldn't shut up.
Right.
And she had to work early the next morning.
Yeah.
See, that's a significant piece of information. So, like, what day of the week is this? Does this go down?
Friday night.
Friday. And so she's in retail. So she's got to be up working the next morning. And does she give you a timeline in terms of, like, when they get home, how long this bitch fest that he's having go on? And for the record, Alison and I never argue, Andy. So thank you. That never happens. So, like, how long does that go on? I'm just trying to kind of flesh out the times, because I'm trying to find a way in which the prosecution and law enforcement, if they investigated this properly, how they landed on we should arrest this woman and charge her with this crime, because I'm not hearing it yet. Like, I haven't gotten there yet as to why
Max dealt with all the experts, and it was really I'd say the biggest reason that they filed charges was their doctors and what they say that the evidence showed. So Max would be best to talk about that.
Sure. So we talked about the ER doctor that kind of gets things headed in the, or away from there not being foul play, which is what detective concludes first night. ER doctor has her concerns, and then next step is the pathologist doing the autopsy. And he also believed the injuries were inconsistent with a fall down the stairs. With him, a part of his conclusion was he believed strikes or injuries to multiple planes of the head. He had questions about the force, whether a fall down the stairs could generate the type of force required. And he said it, I think, would be more consistent with a 30-foot fall. And we, our expert disagrees. I think there's some studies out there that, show that you can generate a great deal of energy from a fall. Even from standing height, you can reach a speed of 13.5 miles per hour. So you throw, 4 or 5 feet with some stairs, and you're talking, a good amount of speed and a good amount of force. But so he reached his opinion that it was homicide. He thought injuries were inconsistent with the fall down the stairs.
Yeah, that's the forensic pathologist, Dr. Wagner. Yeah.
Yep.
That is a good question. What type of flooring on top and then of the stairs themselves?
Carpeted stairs. The bottom was what looked to be like a laminate, like a fake wood.
And the carpeted stairs is a big factor in this case as well. But keep going on, Max.
But so Dr. Wagner, he reached his conclusions, and I like Dr. Wagner. He was careful to say, it's his opinion to a medical degree of certainty. He was careful to keep it within bounds of, the terminology they're supposed to use. But that was his conclusion.
Was he open to alternate suggestions when you threw out some of the conclusions of your expert?
Because
some of them are like, no. And then some are like, oh, that's a reasonable possibility.
He said he couldn't rule out a fall down the stairs. He didn't think a fall down the stairs would cause all the injuries, but he conceded that some of the injuries were consistent with the fall down the stairs. He just thought there's a major injury to the right side of Kevin's skull, and he thought that could not have come from a fall down the stairs.
Yeah, number one, and number two, that Pittenger, the emergency doctor, and Wagner both felt that there was a minimum of 3 blows to Kevin's head, and then their other guy that came in said that it was at least a minimum of 6 blows. So that was another reason that they filed murder, was that it wasn't a fall down the stairs because there was multiple blows, is what they said. Now, our expert, who was the king of the court in the courtroom, he disagreed and said it was all one blow.
So how did your expert sort of explain why these doctors were misinterpreting it in this manner and why, you know what I mean? Like, was your expert able to explain to the jury, like, here's what they're seeing wrong and here's why they're seeing it wrong, or something to that extent?
Ultimately, Dr. Dragovich, our forensic neuropathologist, I think and I think he was able to explain it. We had another pathologist as well that had concluded that he wouldn't rule it a homicide. That was Dr. George Nichols, who unfortunately passed during the course of the case. But so we had two doctors saying they wouldn't reach the same conclusion that the state's doctor did. But yeah, Dr. Dragovich ultimately ended up being a very important witness for us and was able to, I think, provide a very good explanation.
Yeah, he's the only forensic neuropathologist that among all the doctors that testified for the state. And that's just a big difference. And he was he has a bit of an accent. And it's, I over the course of trial, we talked to him a number of times. I could start doing an impersonation of him and what he was kind of, how he was testifying, how he might testify. And he's very, very passionate about the science and about wrongfully convicted people as well. I mean, and he works as a medical examiner for a prosecutor in law enforcement. That's his main gig, is working and testifying for prosecution. So, but he's such a great guy because he also, believes in America and American principles. His kids are all professional and some of them are lawyers, and he, would talk about them and talk about, how wrong it is to convict somebody based upon, junk science and a misunderstanding of science. And man, was he just
So was that part
something.
of it that he was able to explain that they were misunderstanding the science? And is that something you can explain to us, like how he said it was misunderstood?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's not terribly hard to understand. Ultimately what he concluded is that it's consistent with one fall and it's consistent with striking the banister at the bottom of the stairs, which is what caused the significant impacted skull fracture on the right side of the head.
Created a pattern.
Created a pattern. And then there's brain injury to the left side by all accounts. But
like a whiplash kind of thing, or
exactly. Yeah. Coup and contra coup, I think, are the technical terms that we learned through the course of this case. But yeah, the coup is the immediate injury, the injury from impact. The contra coup is the brain bouncing off the other side of the skull.
Yeah.
He looked at the brain and where other people had seen brain injuries indicative of strikes to both sides of the head. He said, no, that's a coup and a contra coup. And I can tell because there's not a commiserate injury on the outside of the left side of the skull.
Yeah.
It's holding it up to the wrong side. But so then that's not the left side of the brain is not a coup injury. That's because there's nothing on the outside that's consistent.
That seems like a pretty big, how could they say he's struck multiple times in the head unless they are seeing outwardly multiple injuries? Would she use the phone book, like police style, hold a phone book up to his head and whack him?
Really heavy pillow.
I'm going to hold this phone book and this kettlebell.
Yeah. We asked ourselves the same question all the time. Like, to the point where it's like, are we missing something? Or is it possible that we're wrong? Is it possible that, when Dr. Dragovich explained it and the light bulb finally went off on my dumb head and I understood what was going on and that there were no outward injuries there, then I'm thinking, how does, and again, Dr. Wagner's a very nice guy and Dr. Pittinger's an ER doc. Now the other guy, Dr. Smock, Max can talk about him more. But when I was like, how are they not figuring this out? And then the main concern was, can we explain this to the jury in a way that makes sense? And Max was just masterful. He was just masterful at conducting the direct exam of Dragovich and crossing their experts to the point that I almost had to drag him off, the stage during his cross examinations. Like, the damage is done, and let's not give them a chance to kind of recoup or whatever, to figure out a way out of what you have just done to them. Max took their crime scene guy out in terms of credibility wise in 5 minutes, and it was over. Yet he continued carrying on doing the things he needed to do to get out for closing arguments. You can't just like, ta-da, he's done. Nobody buys his bullcrap anymore. So
Right, you need to
bring up the next guy. We've got to bring in the evidence to support our closing argument. So
right.
I'm done with this guy. Next. Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
How, when you asked their expert, how do you support multiple injuries to the head, multiple contact injuries without the outward injury? What was their explanation?
I mean, so they've got an ER doc that I think was largely basing it on CAT scans, which, our guy Dragovich he's like 80 years old, or maybe like 76, but he says CAT scans don't really matter to him. And I think other pathologists might disagree with that, but he's a brain guy. He says, I need to see the brain. I need to see the skull, from the autopsy. That's what I work with. And so I think there's definitely, that makes sense, because the CAT scans to see in the head when you can't cut it open and look directly at things.
Right.
But so I think the ER doc, who was not a neurologist, was not a neurosurgeon. She, sees brain injuries in emergency situations. She thought the CAT scan was indicative of multiple injuries. When I deposed her, I hadn't spoken with Dr. Dragovich. And until that point, we had a pathologist that didn't think it was a homicide, but he didn't get into the weeds with the brain injury.
Right.
And so I wasn't asking the coup and contra coup injuries questions for her, but I think on the CAT scan, a coup and contra coup would look like injuries to multiple sides of the head.
But none of them had like an answer for how they could support that when there was no outside injury to that side of the head.
I mean, I think they did think they saw stuff, and for significant portions of the trial, you got doctors pointing at stuff and saying, this is something, then this is something. And,
okay.
I said that in my closing argument. And I said, look,
use your own eyes.
Yeah. I've tried to understand this stuff as best I can, but I still, there are moments where the doctor's pointing to something that he sees, and I believe him that he sees something, but I don't see it.
Well, you had this, significant skull fracture on the one side of the head, which is super easy and obvious to see that that's where you see a skull fracture injury on the other side. So, all right, before we get to that, so I want to try to kind of lay this out from your mindset in terms of being defense attorneys. So you've got, and to me, you said Hetrick was the first. He was the guy that was there first. He was the first responding cop. He was the detective, right? And Mac, are you saying that he had not formed his decision? Because when I read through the probable cause affidavit, I very much came away with it with the idea that this guy thought at the time that night after he left, before he talked to a doctor, that he had already thought that it wasn't consistent with the fall before. That's the way this thing reads to me when I'm reading through the probable cause affidavit, as if he'd already formed some opinion in his own mind as to what had happened that night. So when you guys start digging through the evidence and you've got the medical stuff, you start looking for your experts on this to kind of explain to you guys what their view is so that you can understand the science and the medicine behind it. Did you guys have to search for a bunch of doctors, or did you find who you needed right away?
No, we landed on Nichols early on. We work a lot with a famous lawyer here named David Hennessy, now retired. And
never heard of him.
And so he knows a lot more about pathologists than I do. And he went way back with Dr. Nichols. And so he said, Dr. Nichols is, who I think knows the most about this stuff.
I had used Nichols in a murder. They called it the hot tub murder case back in 2004 or something like that. So I was also familiar with him.
All right. And so how long into the case before you start getting the Garmin and phone data in? Like, how deep are you into the case when that kind of lands on your desk?
So that was summer.
July.
So charges are filed right around Christmas of 2023. It's well into the summer before we really have that stuff analyzed. And I think there's probably a point where I thought, we're never going to get anywhere with it, because Garmin is not helpful whatsoever. They view everything as proprietary,
Right.
and so Yep. And so they'll do like the minimum of what they're ordered to do. So they'll hand over the data, but they're not going to help you with it.
Interpret it.
Yep.
And then how long until the state files a motion to exclude your expert? And do you get a full Daubert hearing?
Yes, we had a hearing. Let's see. So Dr. Karabayek interprets it, and he's kind of a computer science guy from Purdue. I think, I mean, to me at that point, you figure it out that there's pretty reliable data saying that she's asleep. If you had something else compelling to say that she did it, then, that's one thing, but with the strength of the evidence that they had, and then some just majorly exculpatory evidence, it should be game over. It should be dismissal time. But I can't remember when it was first mentioned that they were going to move to exclude it. Very frustrating to hear that, of course. I think I brought Dr. Diaz in at once there was kind of discussion that they were going to move to exclude it, because Dr. Diaz is the guy that's testified basically in, there's like 4 or 5 published cases, and he's testified in about half of them. So at some point I figured out that I was potentially making a record for the Court of Appeals, and I thought it might be good to have Columbia University School of Medicine professor making a record.
Yeah, sounds like the right move.
Yeah, I saw somebody just said that Judge Gull actually had a hearing, and she did on that one, and
that in and of itself is shocking to me.
So what was the she said that it wasn't because of the source code, or what was the issue?
Well, so the order from the court excluding the data is about 1 sentence devoted to the data. We didn't get a lot of reasoning from that, which is a little frustrating.
Zero reasoning.
Wait, are you a Daubert jurisdiction or a Fry or not either? I can't remember.
We're a dumber than Daubert jurisdiction. And so Daubert's relevant, but you can get in, you can testify as an expert or as a skilled witness because you got a lot of experience.
But there's still factors a judge is supposed to identify, lay out, and then give a reason. I mean, is this... So, Max, for you with other judges, is this unusual? Because to me, it's unusual.
I would say it was unusual. Certainly, you got a novel issue as this is. There's no cases in Indiana on this by all accounts. You've got some, heavy-duty experts testifying about it that believe in it and that have, testified on behalf of law enforcement regarding this stuff.
And they didn't produce any experts, by the way.
Yeah.
How did they even challenge it? What was the challenge? You said the challenge was relevance, but you got a Daubert type hearing.
So relevance was the Dr. Westcott's testimony.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, you're good. So this was kind of a Daubert challenge. They said that the scientific basis had not been established, and so then our experts said, it has. There's a ton of studies to say that it has. There are,
interesting logic, because that's the same judge who found the science perfectly sufficient to compare a unspent casing with a spent casing and say that gets to get presented and the jury can decide. I mean, am I crazy, or those two rulings don't live in the same universe in a normal world?
Well, I think there's a pretty glaring
contradiction there.
Distinction in our case as well. That honestly, some of what Dr. Smock was allowed to testify to, I would say, is even less of a scientific basis than the tool mark testing.
So you got one sentence, and that was there's not enough science behind this.
No, not even that, Allie. It was
State's motion limine is granted.
that's
Wow.
it.
All right. So here I've
That's
pulled
it.
up. I've pulled up her order of February 27, 2025, and she's got a 7-line order, and it's all pertaining to the motions in limine. And I'll just read through them real quickly. Just
It won't take long.
Yeah, it won't take long. Anybody who's followed the Richard Allen case will recognize the form
be
and substance
surprised.
of this order immediately. So, number one, defendant's first motion in limine evidence regarding retaining counsel is granted without objection. Well, look at you guys, went in one there. Paragraph 2, defendant's second motion in limine, the 911 call analysis is granted without objection. So that you won 2 there. Look at you guys. You guys are on a hot streak right now.
The state conceded the Tracy Harpster stuff was not science. So
Right. We agree. This is
So
bullshit.
I can't give really any credit.
No,
to that
especially
caller.
when it says without objection.
Okay,
because-
now when we start getting into the good stuff, we'll see where she's really at. So defendant's third motion in limine, opinion as to whether the scene was staged or altered is denied. So that sounds like that would have been some pretty good evidence that you guys were trying to get in there. Defendant's fourth motion in limine.
Trying to get that out.
Right. Defendant's fourth motion in limine, character evidence is granted without objection, except that paragraph 2BC is granted over objection. We've got paragraph 5, defendant's fifth motion in limine, opinion on cause and manner of death is denied. Paragraph 6, state's motion in limine regarding burden of proof is granted over objection, except for paragraph 5, which is inapplicable to this cause. And then state's motion in limine filed November 12th, 2024 at 8:04 a.m. Paragraphs 1, 3, and 4 are granted without objection. Paragraph 2 is granted over objection, and paragraph 5 is granted over objection. Is your ruling somewhere in there?
Paragraph 5 is granted over objection was what
Wow.
Garmin.
And I just want people to know this is not just us lawyers like being like, oh my goodness. No, what they're telling you here, it's a novel issue presented to a court, what we call a case of first impression, at least in their jurisdiction. They had well-known scientists or scientists or
professors.
Renowned experts in there arguing the science, putting it forward. This is the type of thing that a judge is supposed to write out their reasoning. I have never seen a motion like that get denied without at least a paragraph that says, something about what they're basing their
But you actually have seen an order like that from this very woman. It was just in a different case.
I meant in my trial practice.
Right. Oh, you mean you've never had personal experience with a judge who has not decided to put any kind of findings.
Hey,
or
I've
law.
had judges write rulings that are like they're citing the law wrong, but they're still writing.
I'd rather
rulings.
have that. At least they tried.
Right.
Yeah. Well, some people have said that the fact that they didn't put on any experts to rebut it, our experts, that's enough.
Default.
We win, is what some people say. And yeah, just so that everybody knows, I mean, what judges will typically do is some judges get really excited. They may want to show off their chops, like their analytical chops. Here's the facts that came out. Here's what the law is. And they'll go through 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 pages. And because especially on a big case like this, especially on a humongous piece of evidence, exonerative evidence like this, you need to explain yourself.
Right.
And
yes.
You do not want to not explain yourself.
No.
But that's not what happened here. It's not what has happened consistently with Judge Gull and the Delphi case. It's just we can't get into her. The only thing I remember where she wrote anything of any substance was on her order of contempt that came out, where it was a multi-page order. I was shocked.
She was very wordy. She was very wordy in that one.
Made sure to denigrate me a few more times, throw me a couple other punches in there, and then told the world that she was going to file a disciplinary complaint against me, and which I still haven't received yet, by the way. That might be happening. Coming to a theater near you, maybe.
Right.
So you
warn
guys
Andy
are
that
heading into
since the last
trial.
time- Wait, I was just going to let Andy know that since the last time we were with him, you and I both got bouncy chairs. So you guys are noticing that we are moving around a lot. We're
Sorry.
Yeah, sometimes when you think I'm nodding my head, I'm
Oh, you
actually
guys have the
bouncing on
bouncy
this chair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
we're sitting here, I have to have something working the core, otherwise
Right.
we're going. So you guys, like, I want to kind of lay it out. So you're heading into this trial, and Andy, you and I had a discussion, I think, leading into this argument that I knew Max was making in front of Gull. I think we were together either the night before or the day of. We were right around when Max is making this argument about the Garmin stuff going in, and you're like, man, you know, I just don't know, like with Gull, what she's going to do. I mean, like, will I be shocked if she keeps it out? No, but I think it's so powerful that she'll have no choice but to let it in. You know, I remember that we had that conversation. So, like, in terms of your mindset, you guys are like, all right, we've got these phenomenal doctors who are able to break this down for a jury as to these injuries and why they do match with a fall down the stairs. So we're feeling pretty comfortable right then and there. And then this Garmin stuff comes in. You're like, oh my God, like Max said, we're in dismissal world at this point, but we've got to see where this thing lays. And no matter which way a dismissal, whether it was going to get filed or not, you had to feel super comfortable heading into trial. And you guys had filed a speedy on this, correct?
That came later.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
It came
thing.
in March.
I mean, it's a quick turnaround. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, but so heading into it prior to getting the ruling on this Garmin thing, and you guys have to be feeling pretty confident because you have some pretty powerful exculpatory evidence on your side. When you get this ruling where good old paragraph 5 is granted over objection, like, where's your head at that moment in time?
So we got it February 27th, like you read just then. So that we're at that point, we are 3 weeks out from trial. You know,
it's kind of like when April the 28th, when we got an email from Judge Gull on the Delphi case 15 days before trial, sua sponte, saying that there was no ruling in front of her. There was no motion in front of her, motion in limine in front of her on third-party suspect stuff. But she said in a Sunday morning email, "Oh, by the way, if you try to put in third-party suspect stuff, I'm going to keep, I'm going to keep it out unless you can prove a nexus." As we have
and for all intents and purposes, that's what she said.
And yeah, no, I could read it. I have it somewhere. And so I'm equating these two situations are very similar in that it was 15 days before trial. Nick McClelland had hired Odinist experts. He had never thought that he could keep that evidence out. And now when she sua sponte did that in an April 28th email, all of a sudden we're going to have to now go fight that fight and move the trial all the way into October. And so here we are in this case. And, we had, it was December when they filed their motion to keep it out. And it's February 5th or whenever, when we had the hearing, and then the ruling comes out. And now we're weeks away from trial.
So was she preventing you from getting any of the data in at all, or the data could come in, but an expert couldn't interpret it, but you could still use some parts of the data, or no?
Well, I think you really got to parse that order and really look for the hidden meanings.
All right, hold on. So it says paragraph 5 is granted over objection.
All right.
So we, let's see. So then,
like, was the jury able to hear her heartbeat, her heart rate?
No.
God, that's insane.
Yep.
They weren't allowed to hear her steps.
Weight, admissibility. It goes to the weight, not to the admissibility. That's where that should have landed. But
oh my God.
Well,
So,
I mean,
all right. So
wait,
before you go in, a couple of, so when you guys first get the data back, all right, when you guys from things that law enforcement had requested, right? So that, like Andy said, that's a very important piece to the puzzle. This isn't something that you guys are like, hey, you know what we should look into? We should look into this Garmin shit and see if it, like, this is something that they asked for, they requested, they get it, you get it. You get an expert to be able to decipher it and put it into terms that normal people can read it and understand what the data means. And then you turn it over to them. Do they make an offer at that point? Like, is there a conversation that takes place between y'all and the state where they're like, all right.
You're like, hey guys, I mean, look at this. Do you want to reconsider what you're doing here? Like,
I had that conversation with the prosecutor.
Yeah.
is that McClellan or somebody else? Oh no, that's
No, this is Allen County.
right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it seemed like, I think she acted as though she would consider it. But yeah, I had that conversation, and then I just decided we were going to have to win at trial.
Yeah. And I mean, short of like that discussion had to have been like, are you guys ready to drop these charges? Cause like Allison can't be thinking anything other than there's no, like, I didn't do this. There's no way in hell I'm taking any plea where I'm accepting of any guilt and going in to prison for any crime because I didn't do anything. Right. I mean, I have to imagine that was her mindset, right?
She was never going to take a plea of any type.
Yeah. No, not at all. I mean, yeah.
So when you first get it, are you guys like, oh, like, just like, wow, you're walking out, not maybe to her, but in your heads, she's walking out that this is over?
We knew we had some hurdles ahead.
Yeah.
And in terms of the judge and rulings potentially, and any case can be lost. It's just, that's what's scary when you have, that's why prosecutors need to exercise their judgment, in such a way that they're really making some decisions about whether to go to trial or not, or to dismiss based upon the evidence. And I don't want to malign these particular prosecutors. They were pretty okay to deal with comparative to others. And
Right, and they had doctors giving them bad.
Yeah,
intel.
they were very nice and accommodating. Were
they young
in a hostile world?
Were they seasoned prosecutors, or were
They
they
both have been doing it for a while. I think they're both fairly experienced.
Chief trial deputy, chief deputy.
I'm sorry, I don't want to say anything, but I'm going to say they're looking at that data. Even though the judge isn't letting it in, they know damn well it's true, and it's bullshit. The whole thing is bullshit. They should have actually, I mean, I guess you'll never know, we'll never know. Were there any real conversations behind the scenes? Like, hey guys, this kind of looks like, between themselves, this is kind of looking like she didn't do it, and did someone convince them that the data actually could be wrong? Or is that just what they're saying?
They didn't even hire an expert to oppose what your expert. I mean, how could they didn't have anybody that could have told them that the data is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, to Allison's point, and to both Andy's point as well, like there has to be an expectation on prosecutors to be ethical and to look at the facts that are presented. And look, you guys were able to get facts that they didn't have in front of them initially. But, these are things, especially with the Garmin stuff. Look, doctors can disagree. We've seen it happen. We see it happen all the time in our career. That's fine. But when you get something like the Garmin data, which, especially with the heartbeat stuff and the heart rate, I mean, I think they have an obligation to the public, because that's who they serve, to look at something honestly and say, you know what? I think we got this wrong. And it's such an epidemic in this country that they just don't do it ever. Not just in this case, but in any, I have never run into a prosecutor where they've been like, wow, deep into a case where like, man, you guys really uncovered something that opened my eyes here. And I think that we may have gotten this one wrong. We're going to take the step back and we're going to dismiss the charges. I mean, I'm sure they exist in the world somewhere, these unicorn prosecutors, but they're not as common as they should be. That's for certain.
Yeah. My old law partner, Ted Adams, is a prosecutor down in Brown County, Indiana, and he is that way. And he has dismissed murder charges.
God bless him.
Yeah.
So is this the same motion ruling where I got to hear how he's saying it's irrelevant that an expert is going to say that when you're sleeping, all the things you described about how, and Bob, that you pointed out about how time, you don't have a sense of time. You might have heard it sooner, that's a relevance argument. Is that what it ended up being? The judge just granted on the relevance issue, or did that have some sort of
no? Well, it's the state's motion in limine was also not particularly detailed. So between that and the sparse order from the court, it's kind of hard to say exactly what happened or what the grounds were. And I'll say this: just so it's clear. I mean, the Garmin data is not infallible. It's very reliable. The steps are 96% accurate, and that's where it's at its most reliable. And there are just no steps at the time she says she's asleep. So that you can take to the bank. We're talking 96% accuracy. No reason that shouldn't come in. Heart rate is about, there's like an 8 to 10% error rate. And so, you could make an argument that that's not sufficiently reliable. Neither of our doctors said, that's not sufficiently reliable. And the key thing with Alison's is that when she's sleeping, it's very low, and then 911 call and it's elevated the rest of the time. And so even if it's off, I think our doctor said even if it's off by 40%, you factor in, if it's 40% lower, it's still showing this very significant
it's
change.
Still like when you're talking steady, like you're saying, even if it's 40% up, 40% down, as long as it's steady. If it's off, and it's doing something like, up, down, that'd be one thing. But when you've got steady and then an accelerated, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. No.
And I mean, did the data establish that she had not only not taken it off like during the course of the evening, but prior to? Because I think in the mind of the prosecution, they're like, okay, we can't get over this hypothermia thing. This body temperature thing for us is something that we're stuck on. We think that this happened much earlier in the evening. Did the Garmin data establish that because you assume that had she clubbed him in the head with a 20-pound kettlebell, which is a substantial swing of the arms, it's quite an aerobic workout, that there would have been some pretty heavy duty peaks in terms of heart rate. Did the Garmin data establish that she had been wearing it for a definitive period of time?
Yes, she'd been wearing that the whole night. It's getting heart rate data the whole night. That is a good point that you're raising, that there's one period, there's a 15-minute period at 2:45 to 3 o'clock where there are some footsteps and the heart rate goes up slightly. And so if the state wanted to argue, okay, yeah, she's wearing it, then it would have to be she killed him at 2:45. That's the only point at which there's anything.
It could have been when she comes down and says, I'm going to sleep downstairs.
Exactly.
Or she got up and went to the bathroom.
No, either one. It actually lines up perfectly with the timeline of her going downstairs. That made perfect sense. That's when he came to bed, and that lines up with his phone when he gets off his text messages.
Right.
Yeah, there were a couple
storming off.
Yeah, there are a couple of complications with the data, but nothing.
So leading into trial, tell us how you set it up. Like, so how do you line up your witnesses in terms of opposing them? Like, just tell us how the trial goes. How many days did it take? How long were you guys in trial? Give us kind of the logistics of the trial. Walk us through it.
Well, one thing is before trial, there's just a bunch of brainstorming sessions going on in our law firm with a bunch of different people, but the primary four are me and Max and Sierra Phillips, who's our paralegal that's been with us forever, and now she's graduating law school this Sunday, actually.
Nice.
She's probably more brilliant than Max and I combined in terms of her brain power, but
she's watching me and texting me, by the way. So.
Is she? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean she's going to get more money just because I said that. But we offered her a job.
We'll get you nowhere.
We offered her a job, and she's going to be working with us. And she really, we all came together. I want to say right now, during Delphi, Max just took the lead on this thing. And this is what I love about our law firm, is that when one man is down in another trial or whatever, sick or whatever, death in the family, somebody else picks up. And Max just picked that mantle up and ran with it. And, you know, the family knew that what was going on with Delphi, and they knew that eventually I would come back. But you know, what's beautiful is when you have the trust in your people that when you get back from what you are doing, that it's going to be worked up beautifully and you don't have to worry about it. And then I get to just do what I love to do. And that's brainstorm with all the hard work that Max and Sierra and one of our interns named Michaela put together. And, you know, I got to just brainstorm with all that work product that they had done. And I didn't have to go through the actual deposition process, pretrial motion process, going into the one hearing that Judge Gull had. Max took care of all that. He knew all those experts. He had hired them. He had conversed with them. And so I just had to go through all the depositions, all the, you know, the work that they had done. And then we would brainstorm and, you know, determine in our firm, what we do is we do it's not real novel, but we do a good fact, bad facts board. What are the good facts? What are the bad facts? And, and then, so that'll happen. And then we'll start breaking those things down even more. And then at some point in time how are we going to divide this thing up? And the way we divided it up was Max took on the expert witnesses, both directs and crosses. I took on all the law enforcement officers, no surprise. And I did the opening, no surprise. And, you know, it was just a beautiful thing. Voir dire was split up. And so that's kind of how we going in. That's our process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys get to talk to the jurors afterwards? No.
It just drives you nuts, doesn't it? Like I always say, win, lose, or draw, you just always want to talk to the jurors, you know, to see kind of where.
All right, Bob, do I get to ask them about the Gull drama? What was the courtroom drama? What kept them there? Why didn't she get out till some absurd hour? Like, when do I get to ask these questions?
Is that the drama? Which drama are you talking about? That the drama?
Oh,
Hey,
all right. Well, so
Alison. Hey,
so there's a question. So let's talk about the voir dire a bit. How did you guys land in terms of the jury? What was the makeup of the jury going into it?
You have a lot of people that knew you because of
they didn't say so. Well, I was concerned that there would be some of that going on, and we had kind of workbooked that if it did happen that somebody said something.
So did you going in? I mean, you always have those conversations. Okay, who's our perfect juror, right? And in a case like this, you know, like who's your perfect juror walking into that courtroom? Who are you like? All right, like we want this demographic. This is who we need as our juror. Like, did you guys kind of land on that, or you're just like, let's see who they've got, and we'll just kind of gut it? You know, like how did that work out with the voir dire?
We did go through an analysis like that, but anymore, I mean, Max, you can talk about that. I think we just thought, let's just talk to these people and learn who they are. And as much as we're able, hope they're telling us the truth about who they are, and, you know, try to select people that are going to be open-minded. And Max, was there anything different than that?
No, we really had such little information. This court, I think it's Allen County thing, doesn't give you the names of the jurors. And then the questionnaires are just, there's not much there. So we really didn't know much of anything going in. We ended up with 8 or so women. It was a woman heavy jury that I liked in the end. I don't know. I think we went back and forth on, I think ultimately we thought women might be sympathetic to.
Yeah, that's what my thought would be too. And DB is, I mean, my favorite jurors are always middle-aged Black women. Like they can cut through the bullshit. Like they just call it like they see it. Like they're always the perfect juror.
But people do want to know, what is it, a Dateline or a 48 Hours episode? What do you know what it's called?
It's 48 Hours. I know it was there. I think it's going to be an episode in the fall.
So it hasn't dropped yet. Okay.
No, it's not out.
All right, cool. All right, so you guys, Andy, I'm sure you were fabulous during the giving your homespun Matlock vibe during the opening, like, making that connection with people. You're a people person.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I love about you in court. You come off as a very genuine human being, and I think that jurors connect with that. So, and then you can't underplay how important it is for Max to be able to make the science side of it palatable and understandable, man, because it's like, in this case, it's everything.
It was everything. It really was. We did have a third-party suspect. There was a really fun exchange with Judge Gull where during a cross-examination of the lead detective where, we're throwing out there, as Bob and Allie, you guys both know that when, you typically, at least for me, I don't like bifurcated defenses. It looks hokey to juries. But I think we did a really good job of threading the needle, basically saying, listen, we all believe in the defense side, this is an accident. However, for those of you who may not think that, they didn't even investigate whether somebody walked into the house and, bashed him in the head and walked out. And there's evidence that could support that theory. And
I know lawyers hate the bifurcated defense. I have never hated it, to be perfectly honest.
It worked. I think it worked here because we didn't talk to the jury. It's hard to know how much they might have just totally poo-pooed it. But there was a sidebar with Judge Gull where I was cross-examining and talking about, going down the street, did you knock on doors and find out, this and that? There was a drug house across the street that got testified to, and so there was an objection about third-party suspects, and we went to the sidebar, and the judge looked at me and said, "And Mr. Baldwin, if there's not a nexus, I'm not going to allow that type of testimony." And then there was a funny exchange with Max at that very moment where he made what I thought was a really good argument. Max, do you mind telling that sarcasm story, or are you against it?
I'll let you tell it.
Well, you experienced it. So Max, so one of us only can get, he'll let me tell it so that only one of us gets gets in trouble. But
yeah, he's a smart guy.
Smart that way. So, we're up there making our argument, and Max did come up with what I thought is like the cases that Judge Gull was citing, and tell me if I'm wrong, we're talking about making a third-party suspect allegation against a very specific person, and not saying you didn't, it could be somebody from the neighborhood. And Judge Gull looked at him and said, well, that's a real good argument, the argument that he made. And it appeared to us, and I could be wrong, it appeared to us to be sarcastic. And so before we walked away, Max turned around and said, "Judge, for the record, when you said it was a good argument, were you being sarcastic or was that real?"
It's a fair question.
Kind of looked at him and said, "No, it was a good argument." So,
oh gosh,
that was a funny moment for
that
us.
is a funny moment.
But it's like,
it's a legitimate question,
right?
You know
Because
what I mean?
Well, on paper, it's going to look like it's a good argument.
Exactly.
We
Right.
want to know, was she being sarcastic?
and a lot of people are following the Karen Reed trial, and a lot of people here, I'm sure, all of them probably are following the Karen Reed trial. And that's been a big distinction. And it's a big distinction in a lot of cases where it's the failure to investigate separate from third-party suspect. All you're saying is there was a possibility of these other things that you did not fully investigate. And it seems like Judge Gull just does not understand that right to challenge the extent of the investigation, to show that they didn't, they didn't go down every possible avenue.
Yeah.
But you were allowed to get into it enough with the jury, or did you have to abandon it?
No, we didn't abandon it. We did. Max also got objected to in closing for using the phrase drug house, which one of the witnesses, the neighbor, said there's a drug house across the street. The prosecution did not object to it. They did not ask for it to be stricken. And so now it is a part of the record. And the prosecution stood up when Max was talking about, the possibility that somebody from a drug house came over. The prosecution objected, saying it's not a part of the record, which is not true. It was absolutely a part of the record. And Max turned and looked at the judge and said, no, Judge, it is a part of the record. And she just said, move on, and that really irritates me because, we are lawyers trying to make points and score points in closing arguments and being persuasive. And when you are
undermining that.
Yeah. I mean, Max is trying to make a point. And so first of all, when the judge actually, I do believe, I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain she said, yeah, that was not a part of the record. So now you've got the judge who's sitting on a bench in a black robe telling the jury that was not, ignore what you actually heard with your own ears when that witness said it. That's not a part of the record. And the jury may be like, oh, I thought it was, but now I guess I'll have to ignore it.
Right.
When we go back to and that's not a small point.
Right.
And so what should have happened, if the shoe were on the other foot, I don't know if it would have happened, but what should have happened would be this. Prosecutor, that was a part of the record. Sit down. That's what should have happened.
Right. Or jurors, it's up to you to remember the evidence that was put before you.
This argument. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that was frustrating to me. And then I got objected to on closing during kind of the emotional. We did a dual closing. Max did part one and was just really excellent and didn't miss anything. And then I come in, and he's basically, in our firm, we call it the nuts and bolts part of the close. We do a dual close. Nuts and bolts is kind of the more boring part that you try to jazz up as much as you're able to, but you got to get, the facts in front of the jury that you think are important and in the context of why they're important. And then I would come in to close like a true close of we call it, what do we call it, Max? The emotional appeal.
Yeah.
Part of it.
I was going to say an emotional.
And so we call it the nuts and bolts and the emotional appeal. And so I come in on the emotional appeal, and I think I'm scoring points. I think, I'm talking about how serious this is. And I told a story about, that I thought was compelling. And that led into, this is why this is so serious. And this is why some people get it wrong, because they don't take probable or proof beyond a reasonable doubt seriously. They don't take it seriously enough because it is so serious. And I felt like I was really connecting. I felt like I was really persuading. And then about that time, objection. And the objection was one I've never heard in 30 plus years. And that was, objection, Judge. He's not arguing facts and law. I have heard that. But then this, he's trying to scare the jury. And that really bothered me because I just looked at him, and the judge said, move on. When Max had been objected to them during their closing over them trying to say that intuition can be a factor in their determination. It's something along those lines. Max objected, and the judge just looked at him and said, this is closing argument, which is what typically a judge says.
Always what the judge says.
This is closing argument. She can make those arguments. Well, when they objected to me, it wasn't that. It wasn't, Miss Helge, this is closing arguments. He can make those arguments. Instead, it was move on, counsel. And
yeah, I mean, did she make you take your rocking chair that you sit in when you're doing your homespun closings out of the courtroom too? Like Andy's that guy who'll sit in he'll put a rocking chair in there, like he's sitting on the front porch, fire up like a cherry tobacco. I just Andy gives that vibe of like the homespun. Yeah. Like, I love it. It's such an effective. It's such effective.
I do like telling a story, but what I don't like is being you're having your closing arguments shut down by a judge for no good reason, and and in a tense kind of voice that is telling the jury that, well, maybe he's done something wrong, and that happened throughout the trial. Right. I mean, just consistently. We could tell. There was never during voir dire, during jury selection, I'm talking to alternates that nobody bothered to tell the alternates that they're going to be alternates. So judge didn't do it. The prosecution didn't do it. So when I got up, I'm saying, hey guys, by the way, these are for 2 alternate spots. And I want to know, can you sit on your hands during deliberations? Because that's what you're going to have to do. You can't participate. And I'm getting good information from them. And then all of a sudden the judge blurts out, you're giving them false information. They can deliberate. They can talk to each other during the trial, just not during deliberation. I said, I thought that's what I had said. And it's inappropriate to do that,
Right?
because
And
now
it-
you're sending
and
the
the
message to
tone
the
that you're
jury
saying.
that I'm doing something underhanded and false. The word false is wrong. You know what judges do? Good judges that care about what it looks like in the courtroom. They'll say something like, "Hey, counsel, come up here. Hey, make sure that they understand that they can communicate with each other during the trial, but it's only a deliberation. I know that you're doing that, but I just want to make it clear. Oh, okay, Judge, I'll do that. That's how you do it. What you don't do is you don't bark out that I'm providing false information. It really
Right. Judges typically will take the brunt, even if the lawyer is
Yes.
doing something wrong, not to make it seem like it to the jury and then yell at you when they're gone.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know?
And that's not what was going on. I don't think I misspoke or anything, but even if I did, like you said, Allie, the judge should not want to appear biased. And what we're dealing with the entire trial is eye rolls and head shakes. And, it's only on the defense side. And it's
was that bleeding over onto, was her disdain for Andy bleeding into you as well, Max? Or was it both of you, or was it more focused on Andy? Or was she an equal opportunity hater in this particular trial?
I think we got equal. Me and Andy got the same treatment, I would say.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had equal number of eye rolls and harumphs and head shakes and looking at the prosecution for objections, just like she did in Delphi. All this stuff happened in Delphi. You guys were there, it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because juries see that. And if they view the judge as an authority figure from whom they should,
Which they always do,
take the cues from, and one side is getting the eye rolls and the stern voices and the lectures and all that, and the other side that's not happening with them, then that forms an impression on the jury that can be fatal to your client's chances of winning. And that's a major problem.
I kind of chastised a judge for that once in a federal trial, and she ended up, writing me up, and I'm like, I'm gonna go, because I, all the way and have my words heard in front of the panel. And I'm like, what do you want me to do when a judge is being completely out of order? I can't say anything,
Well, and I don't want to dominate the conversation because, again, Max is the guy. I don't want this to feel like I was the one that Max is the architect of this win, and he was the one that won this case. He and Sierra both. Judge Gull. I come in and I'm just window dressing, honestly. But, I'm going to be Max is more reserved than I am. And now that we have no other, the biggest problem after Delphi was we still had Alison Davis to contend with.
Yeah.
And so we can't come out here and talk in a frank way about the way that we were treated in Delphi and the way that we were treated in Alison Davis's case. And anybody that was, we had family members, these poor family members are in the courtroom and they are watching this display of Judge Gull's behavior toward an animosity, what I would, in my opinion, animosity toward us defense lawyers. And imagine their concern. Imagine, and they're coming up to me and saying, how can she get away with this? How can she behave that way toward you? And so it wasn't just us imagining that. You were there in Delphi. Yeah. It happened. These are facts. Yeah. Ethically, we're allowed to talk about what happened. These are the facts. That was the facts in Alison Davis's case, And, I talked to some lawyers that practice around there, and I was like, how do you guys put up with this? And one young guy, there's some bookends. One was a young lawyer, and he said, what are you talking about? The way that she treats the defense lawyers? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, that's not normal? And I said, no, it's not normal. He said he never has practiced outside of Allen County, Fort Wayne. And I said, you need to get out there and compare the way that other judges handle their business. And then the other guy was an older guy, and he did not want to talk to me in the courtroom, but later emailed me and said, you're exactly right. This is how she treats everybody. But he was scared to say anything in the well out of fear for his clients, because this is, people out there may not know this. But when you have clients, when you are regular practitioners in front of a particular judge, you can't really, for the sake of your client, you cannot go after the judge or file an ethics complaint against a judge or whatever you need to do to preserve your client's rights and to have real decorum and proper, to operate properly in a courtroom, because it's the concern would be that you're going to have your next client gets screwed. The client gets screwed over in some way in a ruling or a sentencing or whatever. And, I think that I am feeling very freed up now, because we are never, ever going to take another case in front of that judge, ever. And until she's off the bench.
Yeah.
Then we'll go in that court again.
So what happened with sentencing? And is that the most dramatic thing that did happen?
I mean, at the verdict ruling,
with the verdict, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, Max, go ahead. I'm sorry, I've monopolized
not
this.
Sentencing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's see. Well, so it was a long deliberation.
I don't think 6 hours is that long for not guilty.
Well, how many days did the trial go?
4 days.
Okay.
Yeah, it was long enough that I don't know. I felt pretty good, honestly, throughout deliberations. Andy fell asleep. He went to the hotel room and fell asleep.
Well, then that shows you he was really, really confident.
Yeah. Or tired.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Max and I would be up at 3 a.m. and looking at each other and like, what are we, we would say to each other all the time, why do we do this? Why do we do this? We're up, I'm old, Max is just bearing so much weight on this case because, again, if this fails, it's really, he was going to take that really hard because he's the guy that put the case together.
Yeah.
And he loves the family, and we all became close with the family, and that would have been very, very difficult. And so to lose, in the thought, just the burden of having another human being that's innocent, for me at least, the second person in recent months, that I don't know that I could have returned from that. Honestly, I would have had to, but it would have been just brutal. And so, yeah, when the call came back, that's a moment you guys know about as trial lawyers, when that call comes in that, hey, the jury's back, we got that call. Max, Go ahead. What happened then?
So we go back.
What time is it, by the way?
It's about 11 p.m. I mean, they went out at 5, right about 11. So we go back. They only allow 2 family members in the courtroom, I guess, after hours. So each side,
we have a right to a public and speedy trial constitutionally. I don't know that Judge Gull has the proper ability to keep people out. But
I've never heard of keeping out the family. What, they've kept out the victim's family too?
No,
they got 2.
To be fair, they only got 2 also.
Yeah.
But the family was upset about not being able to get in. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
So we go in. I think so. The jury comes out. No one's looking at us, which always makes me nervous, but that's always the way. I think that's not something you can read into. But then we see the 4-person and felt good. I didn't think this 4-person was convicting. Then she reads it. Andy broke down. Andy was very emotional. And so we, the jury's excused. And he wasn't sobbing, but he, was visibly crying. And I'll let him describe his emotional state. But so the jury leaves. And so I say, Andy, you got to get it together. We don't want, this is the last time the judge could potentially address you in a negative fashion. That's maybe not what I said exactly, but I was like, I don't want you getting talked down to at this moment. So you go stand over there. I'll wrap up, just knowing basically it's a judgment of acquittal at that point. And so Andy walks away, not entirely understanding, because he's very emotional at that point. And then he turns around and whispers in my ear and says, "Wait a second. They said not guilty, right?" 100% serious question.
No, I was being totally serious. I thought Max was pushing me out because the judge was going to set it for a sentencing hearing, and he did not think I was capable because of my emotional state of doing that. And I'm like, did I just totally mishear that? And so, yeah, I asked Max, is that wasn't not guilty, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, good. So yeah. So for me, when I saw the juror, I felt very good. And here's why. That juror and I had formed a kinship, I think, during the trial. One of the things that we like to do in our trial world is have the jury adopt our monikers, our wording, our language. And one of the things that was kind of an important piece of evidence in the case was this picture of a cow with a horn like this, and it had blood spatter on it. And so it was talked about because there was this theory that Alison had hit him near this photograph, and then dragged his body. It was preposterous. I don't even want to get into it. We haven't even talked about Dr. Smock and his preposterous theories, but that was the theory that the prosecutor was rolling with. And so in our law firm, the lawyers working on this case called it the yak photo. Okay, the yak photo. And I was really wanting, again, the jury to take on our terminology. So when I was crossing their law enforcement, I would say, now, moving on to the yak photo, I said, and then I'd say, we call it the yak photo. So others may call it a cow photo or something, but we call it the yak photo. Is that okay? Yeah. So the jury would kind of get a kick out of that. Well, their crime scene guy, State Trooper Stevens, came in, and he was being directed. And then they said, well, what did you do next? And he said, well, I went into the room and I saw this photo with a yak on it, a yak photo. And so I was very pleased that he had said yak, and the juror that ultimately was the foreman, the prosecutor was kind of in his line of sight. So he leaned over and he looked at me, this juror did, and he smiled, and he did his head up and down like, yeah, brother. He said yak, just like you want him to say yak. And so then anytime the yak photo was talked about during the rest of the trial, he'd always look over at me and like smile and shake his head. And when I saw the verdict form in his hand, I was like, okay, I think we're in business.
We're in good shape. Yeah. Well, did they get to ask questions? Did the jury ask questions?
Yeah, Max. Yeah.
They had one question very shortly before the verdict, and it was a hard one to kind of read between the lines on. It was like, if both sides presented a theory, do we have to accept one? And so I still don't know exactly what that meant. They're just
I think it means they wanted to be told, no, the burden remains on the state. Yeah. And you don't have to accept the defense's version to find not guilty. To me, they were not buying the guy walked in from the drug house, or they weren't buying that she just fell. And they wanted to know, did they have to buy your theory to find her not guilty, which is the worst fear that we all have by putting a theory out there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. It's horrifying, but that's what it seemed to me that question means. Well, I don't want to adopt the defense's theory. We don't agree with it, but we still don't think you guys proved her guilty.
Jury did ask questions, Bob. That was while the jury
throughout the trial.
But throughout the trial, they asked wonderful questions. In Indiana, they do get to ask questions, as you learned from the Delphi case. And they were asking really what I would label defense-friendly questions. We felt good about their questions. They were really, making us feel like they're listening, they're paying attention, and they're really asking. A lot of times, gosh, they ask questions that Max even said one time, man, that juror asked a better question than I did the entire direct, which was untrue, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did she? So I wasn't there for the verdict in Richard Allen's case, but did she thank the jury in Richard Allen's case right there? Thank you so much for all your time, and we appreciate it. And go ahead back. I'm going to talk to you. And did she do the same thing in this case?
I think it was handled differently. I mean, my memory could be foggy, and I want to be charitable to the judge when I can be, but I feel like it was a pretty quick exit, and definitely did not. I do remember in Delphi, after the conviction, she, hey, thank you for a good trial, and thank you. She looked at us and said, and both sides tried a good case. That did not happen this time. It was that I remember, at least.
Well, Max, you were in a better, you controlled your emotions better. Did she thank the jury like you're typically used to before she exited the bench?
I can't honestly remember. I remember being fairly quick. It was late at night though, as well. So I can't say one way or the other.
So was there an issue with why that it took your client to get released?
Maxwell.
So there was a bit of an issue. So we were told it'd be in about an hour. That's what the deputies in the courtroom said, that it'd be about an hour. That's how long it takes to process them out. And so we get over at, verdict comes in about 11. And so we go over to the jail with the family. There's 48 hours is there. There's a camera crew following us around at that point. And so we, everyone's very eager for Alison to come out. And so 12:30 rolls around, the jail's telling us they haven't received anything, which is they're specifically looking for a fax. Yeah. They're saying they're checking the fax machine. We don't have anything. And so it gets later, and we're thinking, well, they're probably not still over in the courtroom. So if it didn't happen, it's not going to be till 6 a.m. at this point, or, till somebody wakes up tomorrow. And the jail deputies, they were very nice and very professional, and they had seen it on the news. It had come across on the news there. And so they knew it had happened. They've got 48 hours, standing out there. So they want nothing more than to, release her. And they, got their own concerns when somebody needs to be released, of course. So time goes on. It eventually, I was exhausted. I was getting ready to just call it a night, and I didn't think she was going to get released that night. Our paralegal, Sierra, who I'll give another shout out to, was not going to let it go.
To be associate lawyer, yes.
Yeah, you got a long summer of studying for the bar.
Yeah. And she's passionate about this case, but in this was just, she wasn't going to let it go. Alison was getting out that night. And so she just kept, politely asking to speak to the sergeant, asking to talk to the guards. Eventually, all our information secondhand, but we were told, somebody was able to make a call. And so finally at 2 a.m, we were informed she got the green light to be released, and then she was released.
Wow. Yeah. We just forgot to click send there on the little button. Oops.
Wow.
Well,
she's awful. She's awful.
Yeah, Sierra was just really a hero that night. She's the Max Baker of the Alison Davis case. For those who know, they know.
Yeah.
The other kind of interesting story that I thought happened was this. So there's Steve and Carol are the parents of Alison, and again, just wonderful, wonderful people. Been married 52 years. Steve's a lot like I am emotionally, but he held it together better than I did. I think I was unleashing a lot of other things related to
right there, man.
And I'm sure there was so much added pressure that because of the way the judge treated you, and Max,
that's what I'm saying,
might have affected the jury. So you were probably
it's always rollover from Alan too.
That too, but
in that moment,
these were all concerns. These were all concerns that how the jury perceived us and stuff. But once it came back not guilty, Max and I are walking down we're on the 3rd floor, walking down the stairs, 3 flights. We're both dead tired, and Steve and Carol are walking with us. And we get down there and we're like, oh my gosh, the 48-hour cameras are there, the camera crew. And so, we don't know what to do about that. And, you have seen different things on television, like you walk out and it's like, not guilty. But we thought, let's be a little bit more classy than that. I mean, we also talked to the victim's family, not a victim, the victim of an accident, Kevin's family afterwards, and they were very gracious. We told them, they're a great family. And they said that they had closure with this. The brother believed, you'd have to ask Max about this, but the brother talked to Max and said that he felt that Dr. Dragovich convinced him that it was a fall down the stairs. And so there's a lot of, closure, I think, going on in that courtroom at 11:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And then when we walked down, so Max says to the family and to me, let's just be real, stoic when we walk out. And so imagine that you're the family, because right outside the door to the entrance of the courtroom is all of Allison's family, sister Megan, brother Brian and his wife, and friend Casey, and all these people
who didn't know the verdict yet, because
they don't have any clue about the verdict at all. And in their mind, when people are acquitted and found not guilty, they walk out of the courtroom. So we walk out and we're all stoic, and there's no Allison walking next to us. And Megan, the sister, tells the story that when she saw that, she looked at her dad and was like, what's going on? And just felt like we lost.
Yeah.
Allison's not there. They're acting very stone-faced, and said, Dad, what happened? And he made a gesture like this, and it wasn't clear what that meant, whatever that gesture was. And then she said, no, what happened? Tell me. And he said, not guilty. And
wow.
It's just,
and then
that everybody went crazy, and 48 Hours had that all on video, and it's going to be an awesome episode. I'm not here to promote it, but my gosh, it's going to be unbelievable when people watch that. So
yeah.
So were we in Allen County, or she was for Richard Allen? Where were we physically?
Carroll County.
Carroll County. So she had traveled to Carroll County.
We did jury selection.
We had some field trips up
to.
to
I was there
Carroll County.
One day at Carroll.
Carroll County was the site of the hoodwink, the bamboozle, the one time she allowed cameras in when she brought Brad and Andy in.
Are you talking about October the 19th, 2023?
Yeah, that day.
No cameras in the courtroom unless I'm going to chastise the shit out of the defense attorney. Then come on in.
The judge did, in this case, the judge did allow 48 hours. She did give them permission to cover the March 18th trial setting. And then she changed her mind afterwards. So we have some theories on that, but they're just theories.
Sure. Yeah.
But Max, I'm sorry, I've dominated the conversation.
Which is she didn't want to have to do it in Allen, so she wasn't about to. She got to undo it. There's my theory.
I have some theories, but yeah. So I'm glad we're done. I'm glad I'm glad we're done with that court. I'm most excited for the Krause family, which is Allison's parents, and mostly for Allison, of course. And she needs to just get her life going again. And she's a wonderful person. Her dog Winnie, Dad sent me and Willow. Max Willow. I'm sorry. Sent a text to us with Willow as a part of the fact pattern because he was in the house. And Willow, they sent us a photo with Willow and Allison seeing each other for the first time after 2 years. During the weekend, they sent us that photo, and that was really terrific to see.
Yeah.
All right, let me just read a couple of people's comments to you guys, and we'll just read them and move on. But Kraken says, Andy, let's collab on a song title Not in Gull's Courtroom, where truth dies and innocent men go to prison. Think Bowie meets Stevie Nicks. All right, Kraken. All right.
Okay.
Jason McClelland says, thanks for your coverage. Great learning about digital forensics as our police use Celebrite. I have to go through the messages, photos, and app data. All right.
He's in Australia, I think.
In Australia.
Good day.
Yeah. Good day.
Who regulates judges if they are bad at their job? What do you say?
So I think we could use some more checks.
Well, the Judicial Inquiry Board
Yeah. I mean, they are elected. I don't honestly know if in Allen County, if it'd be a retention vote or if it's a straight up vote. In Marion County, once you're on the bench, so Marion County is Indianapolis, where I mostly practice. Once you're on the bench, you're pretty much good unless you really do something outrageous.
So you're saying we need some more checks and balances.
Right.
That would be good.
I mean, what constitutes outrageous? You know what I mean? Like how outrageous does a judge have to be in order to get and we have this conversation with ourselves all the time, the people that watch our lives, and they're like, what can we do? I'm like, if you live in counties where your judges are elected and your prosecutors are elected, that you have to go vote and don't just vote party lines. Like, do the research into who these people are.
It's hard to
You're putting into these
That's the thing.
incredibly powerful positions that impact lives more than any other position that you're voting for. I mean, and that's true for like on a personal basis. You know, I mean, these are people that are dealing with the people that live in your town. They're making huge decisions in terms of whether to arrest people, charge people. You know, they're sitting on trials, and, you know, so they have a huge impact on the community you live in. That's one way that you can really kind of effectuate some change.
All right. Jason McClelland
Hey,
says
glad there's not a D on the end of that name.
that, you know, people use like names, they, you know, like to kind of refer back to things all the time. I don't know if this is really a Jason McClelland or not.
Well, but there's no D. That was
right. All right. So you both have a huge amount of compassion for your clients, decent lawyers in front of an independent judge.
Indecent judge.
Sorry. Can't someone run against Judge Gull? How does she stay on the bench? Sounds like a question other people are asking it themselves as well.
Our firm has supported in the past financially people running against judges that we don't like.
Yeah.
And who are not good at their jobs. So that is something that
you can.
Yeah. And frankly, as far as Gull goes, you know, that's an Allen County problem. You know, that's
doesn't mean I won't part with my money.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Aspiring court reporter says at some point it's like the sunk cost fallacy. Like
sunk.
My eyes are. I should get
clearly. You should put your readers on.
Like they've gone too far to just drop it. Right. That's like we were talking about when state's attorneys won't just be like, you know what, I might have messed up. Thank you, aspiring court reporter Stephanie. How was jury selection? What kind of jurors were picked? And it sounds like you guys answered that question. You got a lot of women. 8
women.
And
we did lose a juror during the case, which shows you the importance of the alternate juror, and especially when you're getting told during that you as a lawyer by the judge are getting yelled at about providing false information to an alternate juror, and then they end up on the panel. You have to worry about those things. So alternate jurors, and it was a male, so the female got replaced by a male. Otherwise, it was going to be 9-3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
9 female.
Well, and you know, it's important when you're picking an alternate, which is why Andy did this to make sure, like, are you going to be able to pay attention, even though you might never get a chance to deliberate? Or is that going to be okay with you? Are you still going to take it as seriously? And you know, so it's important to ask. Thank you, Stephanie. Tammy McCrae says $5 for Mr. Wiley to smile. It's okay. We all know Gull isn't a nice human.
I'm not known for my emotional range. Andy and I are very, very much opposites in a number of ways, as you can tell from our backdrops.
It's a lot like Andy and Brad.
Yeah.
But I think that she's thinking, or he is thinking, no, she is thinking that you were trying not to smile with Gull. So you were being, you know, like, I'm not supporting what's being said here. Shaboogies. Oh no, she changed it. She's shaboogs. Spoogs. Andy, did you pull back on the BG video to protect Alison?
Protecting Alison was of the utmost importance to me.
All right. Well, there you go. Very insightful, Shaboogs.
So I think again, congratulations. You know, Allison and my Allison obviously know just how big like that type of event is like in your career. You know, like we remember these cases we try forever. You know, they're ingrained in you, and you'll always feel that, and you've allowed a client that you both felt and believed with all your hearts was innocent of this, and you walked her out. So it's
She's got a chance at life now.
incredibly well done.
Almost lost.
I'm very happy for both of you. I'm proud of both of you. The defense bar cheers for you both anytime we get a victory like this against, you know, I mean, Max, I'm sure you heard the shit about Gull coming in, but you hadn't experienced it. You know, I'm sure you're probably like, Andy's probably like blowing the shit out of proportion, even though she's kicking him off cases and saying he's a dirtbag lawyer and you know, all the things, you know, but it's like when you kind of experience for yourself.
It was grossly, let's be clear, it was grossly negligent and grossly incompetent, I believe.
Right, exactly. I mean,
let's just be clear on that.
Yeah, and so now we know that you were carrying that type of weight, Max, of that lawyer throughout this trial. But you know, in all honesty, you guys did just yeoman's work here. Should be really proud of what you've done, and like you said,
being cut out from under you.
Yeah, and I'm cut from the same cloth as Andy. You know, like kind of the emotion and understanding when you have the rest of the family out there, that's when it hits you, you know, with them, and then also combined with obviously the joy and the thankfulness that your client is feeling. It's like there's just not much more that you feel like deep down than when you get that hug from your client when you've been able to walk them out, man. So it's like great job on both of your parts, and you guys.
Mystery and Homicide says thank you, gentlemen, for coming on with us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. As soon as Andy hit me up, I'm like, hell yeah, I want to talk about Alison Davis.
And I just want to say, I've already said it, but I just can't say enough about Max. And it's so, I mean, my law firm, just the partners, the other partners that, you know, allow us to, you know, move pieces around and come in, because we're all similarly passionate about the craft of what we do, and human being wise, we're all good human beings, want to help our fellow human beings and be respectful to the court system and so forth. And Max was, I was super, like, just watching him do his business up there, just the craft. I was just like so energized, even though I'm so tired during the trial. You know, I'm just watching him do his thing up there, and it was so beautiful, you know. And that may sound weird, but it's just so beautiful.
No, we get it.
Yeah, we definitely.
When somebody's doing that type of work, and they put their heart and their soul into it, and you're seeing it materialize right in front of your very eyes, and it's working out in such a great way that you know that it's going to end up with your client being exonerated in large part because of his efforts and the work he put into it. That's as good as it gets for me in the courtroom right there. And I love watching it.
It's very fulfilling. And I think that's something that's kind of lost on, you know, people that don't do what we do for a living, in terms of, like, if you have a case like that, or whether it's Alan, or if it's any kind of large case that requires a huge amount of your time, you know, to have other lawyers in your firm that are able to pick up the slack for everything else that you need to be doing to keep your lights on in your law firm. I mean, it's a huge deal. You know, it's like Allison and I we had two young lawyers when we took on the Garcia case, and it's a practice killer if you don't have other lawyers that are picking up the slack and picking up cases that you need in order to survive as a business, because there is that side of it. It's like, you know, the law firm in and of itself is a full-time job, and operating that and keeping it running and getting bills paid and feeding you and your families. And it's completely separate and apart from the practice of law. And I think that people kind of tend to forget that. So kudos on all fronts, you guys.
And Max, what were you going to say? Give me the last word here.
I just wanted to say Andy was brilliant as well. His opening statement in particular was fantastic. Kept us in the game for sure. So,
well, it's clear you both appreciate each other's art, and that's why you practice together.
There's a lot of love in this firm, let me tell you.
I love it. I love
Well,
it.
we really are grateful you guys came and gave so much of your time, and we congratulate you. Um, anything else?
Yeah. And look, Andy, you always have a home here. Max, next case, man. Just come on in. You broke your YouTube cherry. It wasn't so bad. It wasn't so painful, I hope. But we have a
Hopefully, you were
very
able to ignore all the comments about how good looking you were.
Yeah, I did. I did not see one. So
Max, they even said in a prior podcast episode, some were saying that about me. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Okay?
All right.
you
Well,
guys
thanks,
are
guys.
awesome. You guys are awesome. Congratulations again. I'm super happy for both of you, and I'm more happy for your client because it's a job well done. Go Defense Bar.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Bob.
All right, you guys. Wow, Allie, did you remove him that fast?
I didn't mean to, but I might have.
Really ripped poor
I
Max
did or
right
Max
out of the
did it.
room.
I don't know. I was ready to do it, but I didn't think I did it. But
All right, so
but
that
I
was
did
great.
wait before I did want to say hi to where'd she go? Marilyn. New here. Saw you on the Glare. Can't wait to hear about this case. Well,
Awesome.
welcome, Marilyn, if you're
Welcome.
still here.
And thank you for your
Your
generosity.
generosity. And thank you,
So-
Sandy, for your generosity. Amanda, super sticker, for your generosity. MB, he's like, I'm back and or is that DB? Oh, that was DB.
MB.
All right. MB gifted 5 memberships. Thank you very, very
Wow,
much.
you really can't read shit. You're blind.
No,
You
but
gotta
I was
see
getting
your
mixed up in my head. You guys were talking about DB earlier, and then so I just got, but we will see you. Oh, Chelsea, 8 months member. Woo.
Woo, love it. Love it.
Thankful to hear from you both.
All right,
Congrats.
so I'm setting the live for tomorrow. It sounds like it was Karen's health is the reason why we didn't go live today in court.
You never
So
know because her
we'll
health
keep-
issues could
Yeah.
last more than a day.
We'll keep an eye on it. I'll set the live, and if it goes, obviously we'll be going. So it'll be the same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow for Karen Reed. We really appreciate you guys dipping your toes into a different case. We hope that it was interesting. I thought it was a very interesting conversation. You got some inside dope on a case where we just got a not guilty on a case where it sounds like that was exactly what should have happened. So. And I found it very, very comforting to hear that they had spoken to Kevin's family. And the brother was like, look, I mean, it's nice to know that the victim's family walked away from that, at least the brother feeling as if there was closure, that he learned enough in the trial to feel comfortable about what had happened, because that's always the thing, it's like in people's minds, not guilty and in real life doesn't necessarily mean innocent. So, I think that's big for Alison moving forward with her life. And I'm thrilled. And it just proves what I already knew, which is Andy's a hell of a lawyer. And now we know Max is as well. And Matt, like Andy's always talked about his firm and he's got great lawyers in there. And this proved it. And I love just thinking about Gull just steaming up on that.
Yeah.
Bench.
Like all of her bullshit, and they still got a not guilty. All right, guys, we will see you tomorrow.
Love it. See you guys. Thanks.
You all.
Without you, I'm just an old man.
Talking
See ya.
a lot of shit.
Bye.